Breaking news on CBS Sports HQ, more carnage in Cleveland. John Dorsey out as Browns general manager. Our Jason Lockenfora has confirmed this news. After the firing of Freddie Kitchens, the Browns continuing to clean house by getting rid of John Dorsey. Now, the reports are that the two sides were speaking, but they could not come to an agreement on the future restructuring of the organization. Dorsey took over in 2017. They went 0-16. Had a good year in 2018, nearly made the postseason, nearly had a winning season, but it didn't happen. They were supposed to take that big jump this season, and they only won 6 games. I'm Chris Hassel. Pete Prisco is here with me. Your initial reaction to the news today?
Well, it looks like there's a power struggle inside the organization between Paul DePodesta, who is an analytics guy, and John Dorsey. He's an old school football guy, and it looks like the analytics guy has won. And they might bring back Andrew Berry, who's now with the Philadelphia Eagles, who work with them, another strong analytics presence. And I think that's the direction they're going. So, look, John Dorsey's old school. He's an old school football guy. And he watches the tape, and maybe he pays attention to the analytics, but he's not going to dive that deep in analytics. So that's what this sounds like to me.
Our Jason Lockenfora has confirmed this news, and he's joining us now live on CBS Sports HQ. What more can you tell us, Jason?
Well, I mean, really the seeds of this were sowed with the decision which was made in the Haslam's mind, the ownership's mind, to part from Freddie Kitchens after that loss to Baltimore in Week 16. That sealed Freddie Kitchens' fate. That was known throughout the building. John Dorsey, Paul DePodesta, and some others started calling around the potential coaching candidates that week, which is when I caught wind of it over the weekend, trying to put together their list to present to Jimmy Haslam to sort of make their case for why the organization should go in this direction or that direction. And at the same time, you've got Jimmy Haslam reaching out to people who he's come to know through the years, like Urban Meyer and some other coaches, seeing if maybe that's the direction he wants to go in, with a sort of uber coach who would basically blow the entire building up and come in with his own ideas about training, nutrition, everything basically being turned over to that coach. And the names that John Dorsey was looking at in this coaching search were frankly people with ties to John Dorsey who wouldn't rock the boat, and coaches who wouldn't want a big hand in personnel. You know, guys like Mike McCarthy, guys like Eric Bieniemy. I don't think, that's necessarily the direction that the Haslams want to go. And then you also have Paul DePodesta, who's been there for years, as Pete said. He has curried more favor because in the past, the names that he said, my model, our analytics model says this would be the best guy, right? Well, that was McDermott at one point, who's done a great job in Buffalo. Jimmy Haslam hired Hugh Jackson. A year ago, the analytics guys in Cleveland were really pushing Kevin Stefanski. John Dorsey got that hired. John Dorsey was absolutely behind Freddie Kitchens. So when Kitchens went down, Dorsey was going to have a tough time keeping his job unless the Haslams were willing to hire someone who already had ties to Dorsey, who then could provide a unified front. That's obviously not going to be the case now. There was, really nothing Dorsey could say at this point. The Haslams were going to go in a different direction. They want to be wide open to any of these coaching candidates in terms of structure, organizational philosophy, etc. Nothing's for long in Cleveland, guys. We know that much. And let's just go back to when this started. When they brought John Dorsey in at the end of the season 2 years ago, they told him what? You got to keep Hugh Jackson. So, Dorsey, they never really do things the normal way in Cleveland, and that's why they end up in these staccato situations where you're firing one guy now and one guy a couple days later, or maybe one guy 6 months later, but nobody survives there more than 2 or 3 years.
Jason, how much, in your mind, is this one of those situations of an analytics guy against an old school football guy, and the organization kind of leaning to the analytics guy?
I have to just put it back on D and Jimmy Haslam. You know what I mean? Regardless, nobody gets into either of those seats. The GM seat, where we've seen them bring all kinds of people with different backgrounds in, right, at various times. Sashi Brown, John Dorsey couldn't be more diametrically different in everything about them. They succeeded each other. Coaching, the same thing. I think it ultimately falls on them, and they don't have that inner compass, whether it's their gut instincts or whatever, they don't seem to listen to the right people at the right time. And people catch their ears at different times, and they just kind of oscillate from one thing to the next. But they have not shown to have a steady hand, period. They have not shown the ability to be stewards of an organization and present a foundation that they're willing to stick with for more than 18 to 24 months. And I think that's ultimately what continues to cripple them. Maybe there is someone who will save them from themselves. They tried to trade for Jim Harbaugh years ago, right? I mentioned Urban Meyer. Maybe they hand everything over to somebody like that and get completely out of the mix. But I'm not sure that would work either. I can't believe it till I see it, Pete. But I wouldn't give Paul DePodesta too much credit. I mean, the guy is in California all year. He's barely in the building. And again, if he was the man, they should have listened to him on some of these other coaching hires. I just think it comes down to the Haslams, and it's D, and it's Jimmy, and it's J-Dubs, and they're steering the ship. That's the three voices that matter.
But you do hear now that Andrew Berry might be coming back. He's now with the Eagles, was with the Browns under the Sashi Brown regime, which was a heavy analytics regime, and built that organization, got all those draft picks that way. So if that's the case, then maybe they are moving back into that direction. I don't like it personally. I'm an old school football guy. I like analytics to supplement my football, but I don't think you can overhaul an entire team by saying we are going to be analytics driven. I just don't like it.
And you can't pin that 0-16 season on John Dorsey. He didn't come in till the end of that season. There were only a couple losses where he was general manager there. When you look at the guys he was able to draft and the people he traded for, the trades he made, would you consider John Dorsey a successful general manager to put this team in a position to succeed?
No, not yet. It was too early. He made the quarterback draft, the pick in Baker Mayfield. Was that the right pick? That's to be determined. After this year, you'd say no. But again, you got to go back to the coach. Freddie Kitchens was a disaster. So there's 0 for 2. Trading for Beckham hadn't worked out. 0 for 3. They traded Zeitler for Olivier Vernon. Is that a win? No, wash at best. So maybe 0 for 4. And then he forgot the most important adage. And if analytics can tell you this, then God bless you. Go with the analytics. You got to build your line. The offensive line was a disaster. You can have all the skilled people you want, but if your tackles can't block anybody, you're not going to move the football. So was it a success? No. Is it too early to get rid of him? Probably.
Jason, did John Dorsey have a chance to save his job had he agreed to something that ownership wanted today?
I mean, look, he was hired as the general manager. He was given final say over football operations. By today, there were no scenarios that existed in the Haslam's mind where he was still going to have that much power. So, you know, at that point, you probably are better off brokering a settlement, because the job, as presently described, isn't the job that he was given, 2 years ago. So I don't think it's reasonable to think that he's going to agree to be some cross-checker or super scout who now may be reporting to Paul DePodesta. He may be reporting to some coach who hasn't been hired yet. I think it's pretty naive to think that you're going to be able to work something out. And at the point where Haslam tells you, hey, you no longer have the power that, your contract says you have, it's essentially over, no matter what the paradigm shifts towards, no matter who's filling which roles. I don't see how Dorsey really would have stayed. I mean, and then, what are you going to do? He brought in Elliott Wolf, he brought in Alonzo Highsmith. That's sort of the triumvirate at the top of football operations. Now, those guys would be neutered as well. I just don't see how you sort of work out an uncomfortable arrangement to keep anybody around, nor really should you. I mean, the Haslams are going in a different direction again. They just have a funny way of signaling it.
I mean, you look at his draft picks on this graphic. Garrett, big hit. I like it. Peppers, traded him away, wasn't a hit. And Njoku's been hurt, hasn't lived up to the hype. Ogunjobi's been a good pick. Mayfield, to be determined. Denzel Ward, good player, but hurt. And Chubb's been an outstanding pick. So it's been hit or miss, I think, for his draft picks. But again, you see any offensive linemen on that board? They blew it by not fixing that offensive line.
Good point. Jason, what's next? You're without a head coach. You're without a general manager. Chicken or the egg? I mean, do you need a general manager first, or is ownership just going to make the call on both whenever they want?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're a Browns fan, you're at the whims and mercy of the Haslam family, and however they want to proceed. Now, with the coaching search, it's dictated by NFL rules. There's guys like Mike McCarthy you could talk to whenever. There's guys who are coaching in the wild card. in the wild card games who you're probably going to try to get an audience with as soon as those games end. Kevin Stefanski would obviously be a big key name for them. Again, I mentioned how Paul DePodesta and people in that building were very high on Stefanski a year ago. I would just caution to sort of to what Pete was saying. It's not just, you know what I mean, all numbers and models. Thinking Kevin Stefanski can come in there with all those big personalities, you know, that's a different chore than your average head coaching job, especially with Kitchens just being blown out one and done. And then there's other coaches who are on the bye this week who your time to get an audience with them is generally Friday or Saturday. So that's going to sort of dictate that scenario. And it's clear the Haslams are open to hearing different things. So does someone blow them away in an interview and present a different power structure than maybe they're considering right now? That's all on the table.
All right, that's Jason Lockett-Fora, who has confirmed the news out of Cleveland that John Dorsey is out as general manager of the Cleveland Browns after 2 years and 2+ seasons there with the Cleveland Browns. Thank you so much, JLC. We're going to step aside for 60 seconds. When we come back, we'll speak with our senior writer, Jonathan Jones, and we also have statements from Browns ownership and that man himself, John Dorsey, fired today.